is the simplicity with which it can be played. You don't have to know the right way to hold it. You just plop it on your lap. You need some way to strum the strings. And then beyond that, you need one functioning finger, or at least a nub, to push down a string and then move it around. Now, there's just a little taste of soldier's joy right there. All I did was hardly strum the strings at all and used one finger. Now, what's really unique about the dulcimer, which has the lap dulcimer or the mountain dulcimer, it has two proper names. What made this such a great instrument is that you might notice the spaces on the necks of my other three instruments here. Those metal bars making these spaces are called frets. Now the frets, what they do is that basically tells you where to put your fingers. But the trick is you still have to know which frets to play on to play the song correctly. You don't just play all of them. You can, but that's more of a John Cage thing than a bluegrass thing. Now the dulcimer, you might notice they're all over the place. I've got big spaces, little spaces, big spaces, little spaces, seemingly no rhyme or reason. However, there is a rhyme and a reason. I've got a whole scale there. I don't have to skip frets. I don't have to know where to not play in order to play the song. You just go crazy, which made the instrument better, and I think was a great resource. To reiterate, with music being its own wordless language, you might feel a little left out if you can't speak the same language as everybody else in the holler did. And it's even worse if you don't have an instrument to play on as well. So the washboard was a good one to provide a percussive sound. And then we had a real instrument that came along at some point in history, which was easy enough to play. And this is all with one finger. This particular dulcimer was actually made in Fairmont, West Virginia, I think 1973, by a fellow named Gene Dickinson. He was a luthier out that way. Primarily, he would make dulcimers. I managed to pick up two from a buddy of mine who, I guess, bought a bunch of them and then realized I need some shelf space in my house. So he said, "Hey, Robbie, I'm selling all these dulcimers for $100 a piece, but if you'll take more than two, you can have them all for $150. And I said, "Well, I guess I'm not buying gas this week. Let's do it." So I explained it to my landlord later. They didn't get it. At some point, if anybody would like to take a crack at the dulcimer, I highly encourage it. It's okay if you're not comfortable playing instruments. That's okay. It's a fun thing to at least experience and to get your hands on and to just, experience, and then you can find somebody selling Gene Dickinson's dulcimers and get a couple for yourself too. To go elsewhere, a luthier, forgive me if I already said this, just making sure I don't forget. A luthier is a carpenter who specializes in working on musical instruments. Wooden instruments particularly. So part of this book, it was very interesting, was this historian had cataloged some of the rather crude tools that were made in order to build instruments. Your presses and your clamps, the rings to stretch the possum hide so you could have banjo heads made. They even found somebody who had some kind of jig they were using to make gut strings. All of these strings now are metal, but they used to make them out of gut. My fiddle actually had gut strings on it when I first inherited it, and it sat in an attic for about 90 years, so you opened the case and it just wafted out. It was wretched. So what's really interesting is we have all of these different components that started out as old-time mountain music, went to become bluegrass music, in many ways inspired rock and roll. We mentioned the mandolin chop inspiring the snare beat in rockabilly and rock and roll and everything since then. We're familiar with Chuck Berry here. At least I'm sure a couple of us have listened to Chuck Berry's music. If you listen to a Bill Monroe record and then listen to a Chuck Berry record, almost all of Chuck Berry's licks were ripped off from Bill Monroe. Hey, not ripped off. He admits that he was inspired by Bill Monroe, but they're the same.